Thank you very much. Well, today I'm not here to teach you how to perform circus tricks. I am here to show you some tips and tricks to help you hoop the perfect pitch. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about positioning ourselves with confidence, getting into the right mindset, building a presentation on a solid foundation, and then getting into showtime, some keys to remember during the actual presentation, what to look for in visuals, and how to answer your question and answer with poise, or what I like to call going with the flow. So let's get started. First, we want to make sure that we enter into our mindset, in a presentation mindset, with the proper position and confidence. And so I want to talk about three things that we're going to look at: breath, articulation, and practicing your power pose. So let's talk about breath to begin with. When you speak, you want to make sure that you're speaking from your diaphragm, right? So the sound when you project comes from that place. So there's a little exercise that I like, and it's holding your breath in for 5 seconds, or breathing in for 5 seconds, holding for 5 seconds, and then releasing for 5 seconds. It helps build that strength so that you can further project your voice. So I'm going to ask you to stand up. Sorry, stand up. Now, we're going to count, and we're going to take 5 seconds to take a deep breath in. We're going to hold, and then we're going to release. Ready? Great job. So go ahead and you can sit down. So taking a deep breath helps to reduce physical anxiety as well as to build that muscle strength. So the next thing we're going to talk about is articulation. When you speak, you want to make sure that you're clearly getting your words across, right? You don't want to get up here and like talk all mumble jumble, right? So nobody can really understand what you're saying, right? So articulation is important. So there's some great exercises to do that. I love tongue twisters. So I'm going to teach you 2 tongue twisters that I like. And when we do these, you're going to have to overemphasize your articulation of these. And so I'm going to give them to you. We're going to say them slowly to begin with, and then we're going to speed them up really, really quickly. And the goal is to continue your articulation. Are you ready? So the first one is called red leather, yellow leather. So you're just going to repeat that. You ready? Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. Great. Okay, the next one is called chew wax. You ready? Chew wax, 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 chew wax. Okay, great. So now that we've breathed, we've calmed our physical body down, we've articulated our words, and we're almost ready to speak, we're going to practice a power pose. So numerous psychological studies show that standing in a position of confidence actually decreases your physical anxiety and stress and increases your confidence. Amy Cuddy is a psychologist. In a 2012 TED blog, she said, while high power posers experienced a 25% decrease in cortisol, or the hormone that causes stress and anxiety, low power posers had a 15% increase in their stress level. So what we're going to do is I want you to think of your favorite superhero. You got it? All right, I want you to stand up again. This guy's ready. So put your shoulders up, back, and down, right? And I want you to think of energy coming up through your spine and stretching to the ceiling. And I want you to feel the placement of your feet on the floor. I want you to feel grounded. Now I want you to choose that superhero pose. And I want you to do it, and we're going to hold it. Are you ready? Go. Yes, great job. Okay, sit down. You guys have got it. Okay, so now that we've breathed properly, we've worked on articulation, and we know how to embody our perfect superhero power pose, let's add an affirmation. I love Yoda. Yoda says, no, we do not try, do or do not, there is no try. So tell yourself, I've got this, right? Okay, great. Now we're going to look at some foundations of what we want to enter into when we give a great presentation. I like to look at the superhero Aristotle. Aristotle gave us 3 foundations and building blocks which to build a presentation: ethos, pathos, and logos. And so we're going to run through those very quickly. So ethos establishes your credibility, right? So before you give your presentation and you're in the thinking and processing stage, you want to really look at developing who you are as a presenter, as an innovator, as a designer, and craft your why. Why is this important to you? What is your personal connection? What is your personal narrative? And what is your personal why? Why are you qualified to speak about this, right? So I love what Simon Sinek, he is a communication leader and author, and he speaks about leadership and communication, but specifically the why. And so he says that he argues that great leaders inspire action when they start with the why, right? So if you want to inspire action from other people, you want to inspire action from your judges, you want to inspire action from potential partners, you're going to get them to look at the why you're doing what you're doing. And Apple does this, and we'll get to the golden circle in a second. Apple does this, and they point to their why, and they say that we bring the best user experience through innovation, right? And then they look at the how they do that. And they do that by bringing innovative practices, creative practices, cutting-edge technology to the table. And then they look at the what. Then they sell the what. And the what is the products, the laptops, the iPads, the phones, right? So we buy into why. We buy into the heartbeat of the product. Because we can get a phone anywhere, right? But if you're an Apple enthusiast, you're going to go to the why they do what they do. Next is the pathos. Pathos is the emotional connection and the human connection. It's the storytelling piece. Pathos, I like to say, brings the heart, right? It lets your audience know, again, who you are, and they want to hear you, right? David Kerber is an HR manager at Careers Boost, and he provides a little bit of insight on that. He says people that attend your presentations are expecting a lot of things, right? They want your idea to be good, but they also want you to be a great partner too. And in order to impress your speech, you should get personal and emotional. Make them empathize with the mission of your brand. Make them feel what you're feeling, right? They want the feels. They want to connect with that. So while pathos moves the heart, logos moves the mind. And so logos speaks to the logic of your argument, right? Yes, you bring the heart, but you still have to bring the data. You have to bring the research. You have to bring the support, right? So I'm going to draw your attention. We know we need support. We know we need evidence. On the far right-hand side, you'll see objection and rebuttal. And we're going to come back to this and how to handle a Q&A section. But during this part, when you're preparing for the speech, it's great to anticipate what are some possible objections to my logic, or some rebuttals that I may have to my logic and my argument. And if you can present them within the speech and then answer them within the speech, then you're going to position yourself ahead, right? So for example, you may present an argument, and then you may say, now I know you may be thinking X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to answer that for you, right? So it's good to kind of answer some of those questions in advance, if you can. Now, we know where we're going with our foundations, with our building blocks. We practiced our superhero poses, and we've got down our tongue twisters, right? Showtime. Yes. That's where the stars shine. I love what Antonio Melchiorri, and I'm sure that I completely slaughtered that pronunciation. I love what he says. He's a leader in the hospitality industry, and he says, your energy introduces you before you speak, right? So you want your audience, you want the judges to feel your energy, to feel your heart, to feel your passion before you even open your mouth. So connection is key. So we're going to talk about how to make connection with the audience in 3 different ways. One is eye contact, the use of movement, and the tone in your voice. So first let's look at eye contact. Oh, just kidding, going back to eye contact. So eye contact is a social cue that invites engagement with your audience, right? It says, I see you, and I know you see me, and I know we're communicating and we're having this conversation, and it makes it personal. But there's some effective ways that you can use eye contact, right? So if you're using eye contact and you're really nervous, right, and you're kind of doing this with your eyes, It can create a little bit of confusion and chaos for your audience because they don't know how to connect with you, they're feeling a little bit scattered, they're not sure where they're supposed to look. So some effective ways to use eye contact is one, to connect with key people in the audience, right? Pick out a few friendly faces, maybe before you get up to speak, and intentionally connect with those during certain parts. Now, you don't want to look at one person the entire time through your presentation. That can feel a little creepy, right, for both your audience member and yourself, but you do want to make sure to connect. The second way is to kind of divide the room up, right? So I may be speaking to this part of the audience for one specific sentence, and then I'll move over to the middle, maybe share another statement, and then I'll shift my eyes over here for a third statement. Now, if you're really, really nervous, instead of connecting with the eyes, consider looking above the head, right? It's not that far from the eyes, and it helps to get rid of the jitters a little bit. The next is movement. Michael Wardlaw is the founder and director of Pensacola Youth Ballet here in Pensacola, LaBelle Performing Arts, and I recently heard him say something that is so powerful that also I can believe can be so applicable to public speaking. He said that movement creates drama. Now, we're not talking about movement, like flailing your arms about right and back and walking back and forth. Have you ever seen speakers that pace like this? They're like really nervous and they start flailing your arms. It's the same kind of concept of shifting your eyes all over the place, right? It's your audience becomes confused, there's no sense of grounding in the presentation. So it's important that when you have movement, you want it to be intentional. And so a way that you might do that one is by using your hands and say, today we're going to talk about 3 points. First, second, and third, right? Or you may say, you may emphasize certain words by using a downward gesture with your hand or an upward gesture. And in closing, and next point. You see, you kind of understand the feel. Keep your hands to your side if you're not using them. Or put them to the back. If you put them to the front, it creates a closed off feeling with your audience, so you want to remain open. The second use of movement can actually be with your body. Again, if you are pacing back and forth, right, your audience doesn't know where to go, it can be a little bit chaotic. So when you move, consider moving your body on the point. So today we're going to talk about, first we're going to talk about this. Talk about what you're going to talk about. Move on to your second point. Move on to your third point. Come back to the center for closing. And step forward to make your final point of emphasis. It's really powerful, right? And it creates a clean movement. Third is tone. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's so much how you say it, right? So you want to think about your volume. Am I projecting my volume to the back of the room? Can my audience hear me? Am I speaking really high pitch, right? And that's okay. If you have a high voice, that's okay. So you want to kind of practice lower. Lower voices can create a depth of seriousness, right? And if you have a really low voice and it's very serious, try to lighten it a little bit in your head. So play with your voice. See what kind of feeling that you can get. Tone is attitude, right? Are we serious, or are we creating a little bit of fun with our audience? And that's okay. This is a very serious presentation, but you've done the hard part when you do your homework. Now's the fun part, right? So have fun with your audience. So if I were to present a sentence, right, in my presentation, and I were to say, today we will present a simple solution that will transform a familiar business process. Crickets, right? No feeling, no emotion, very monotone, very dry, probably didn't even hear what I said. But if I change those elements that we spoke about and I say, today we will present a simple solution that will transform a familiar business process, right? We take the exact same words and we emphasize and use certain tone and certain intonation to get our point across. Okay, so now that we've moved on to we've talked about placement, we've talked about position, we've talked about tone and audience connection, we're going to talk a little bit about the outline. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I know that this is a very familiar format for you. But I do want to mention 2 things. One is the hook and the next is your close. So your audience will remember 2 things, if nothing else. They're going to remember your opening, if it's memorable, and they're going to remember the last thing you said in your closing. So it's important to keep those tied together. So in your hook, be engaging. Again, when you think about that energy, let people see your energy and feel your energy before you even open your mouth. right? Let them engage and connect with you. Some ways to do that is to use statistics. If you're going to use statistics that shock, right? Make it very simple, because you're going to explain your research and you're going to explain your statistics later, right? Make it a simple statement. Use a narrative. I love narratives because a narrative hooks into the emotional appeal and into the heart right away, right? It captures your audience. And a narrative that you can begin in the beginning, once you go through your presentation, you can finish it in the end. And you can say, you know, earlier I told you the story about Sally. God bless Sally, whoever she is, right? And then in the end you can say, but what I didn't tell you, right? And you can bring the kicker in the end. Now, you can demonstrate, right? What if instead of hooping and doing my fun circus tricks for you, I showed you a really drawn out slide with physics calculations of hooping properties, right? The physics behind the hula hoop. I just showed you the slide. I don't know, maybe you might have thought that was interesting, right? But I chose demonstration because I hope that you're going to remember it tying into this speech, right? So let's talk about the close. Loop your close back into your beginning, right? Again, if you share a narrative in the beginning, tie that up in the end. Summarize. Repetition is key for getting people to remember. So make sure that you're repeating. If you can repeat throughout the speech 3 or 4 times the concepts, they're going to be more likely to stick. Let's talk about visual aids, right? Remember, less is more. When you're delivering your speech, you're the star of the show, right? And so star of the show, you don't want to upstage yourself or take the attention away from your message and your delivery by having a clouded visual aid. So don't distract, right? Ooh, what about this? First of all, it's a terrible image, can't even read it. Second of all, there's so much data on there, right? That even if it was fuzzy, do you think you could even read those words? Right? You're going to give your audience a headache. Don't do that. Don't do that. Second, do not use paragraphs. Do not even use full sentences in a slide. And don't let your text conflict with your image there. You see you have conflicting backgrounds and conflicting imagery there. Use 3 to 4 bullet points, right? Key points if necessary. If you're going to use tables and charts, make them simple, right? Explain the concepts. Explain and share as much as you can. The visual aid should enhance your communication, not distract and make your audience dizzy. Ooh, I'm getting dizzy, y'all. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to handle question and answer. We talked about connecting with our audience. We've talked about grounding. We've talked about reducing physical anxiety. Now we're finished, right, with our presentation, and we get to go into Q&A. So remember, confidence is key. Thank them for the question. Thank your audience and your judges for questions. Stand poised, breathe, smile. And remember, you're the expert. You're the expert on what you know, and you're not necessarily expected to be the expert on what you don't know, but you can plan, right? So what I would suggest is go back to that logos section in your mind where we talked about logic, we talked about rebuttals and thinking of objections, right? And during that time, ask yourself, what might be 3 to 4 questions that my audience might ask or my judges might ask? And go ahead and answer them in advance so that you're prepared, right? Make them broad enough so that you can impromptu answer them. Identify 3 to 4 experts on the team who will speak about specific things. So for example, if someone asks a question about budget, say, well, our expert on budget, I'm going to turn this over to so-and-so, and they're going to answer the question. Go back to basics. If you don't know the answer to the question that's being asked, say, well, unfortunately we cannot answer that question at this time, but this is what we do know, and this is what our research has found. We hope and we anticipate in future research that we will be looking for X, Y, and Z, and so these are some things that we do hope to answer. It's okay to ask if you can get back with the answer to the question. So it's probably more than likely that the judges might ask you a question that they know you may not have the answer to, just to see how you're going to respond, right? Just to see how you're going to react, because they're going to want to see if you actually thought through the process to anticipate rebuttals, right? So today we talked about positioning ourselves with confidence. We talked about coming up with a plan. Oops. Going back to the foundations, right? The foundations of rhetoric, the foundations of great speech. We talked about showtime, some things that will help connect us with the audience and help to bring a great energy. Talked about visuals and connecting through visual, and then answering Q&A with poise. So remember, you don't have to be a circus performer, right? You don't have to be the very, very, very best in the world. But you do have to bring your personal best, and you do have to plan, prepare, and anticipate for what's coming. And so today, I hope, well, I didn't show any tricks on hooping or circus performing, which we can come back and do if you would actually. We did talk about some tips and tricks that I believe that if you take them and use them, will help you hoop a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandy. And so we actually have another guest speaker for you guys today, Joe Vinson. He's the Assistant Director of the Innovation Institute here on campus.
Hello, is this already here?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
All right to be. Man, I wish I wasn't following somebody who talks about how to do a great presentation. I'm going to try to incorporate some of those lessons, but I'm here to talk about the video aspect. I understand that as part of the elevator pitch, there'll be a 2-minute video. And so I am the Assistant Director of Communications at the Innovation Institute. Before joining the university, I worked for the Student Community Institute as Digital Director. And before that, I spent about a decade with the Applegaard Agency, doing new media like video production, web development, motion graphics, all sorts of fun stuff like that. So I do a lot of video production, video editing, and apologies if any of this is very obvious, the things I'm going to be talking about. I mean, people now do a lot more video editing on their phones, and just casually. You know, Vine is dead, but we got TikTok, we got all sorts of things that people are used to. I apologize also for my cough. That time of year when So the first thing I want to talk about is planning. Obviously, the quality of a video is kind of meaningless if your content is not good. So the most important thing is know your structure. Make a plan the work, and then work the plan, and that comes down to a lot of think about the timeline of your video. If you have 2 minutes, break it into chunks. Just like a writer might think of a 3-act story when they're writing, it's not a strict thing. It helps to keep in mind how much time and space you're going to devote to each portion, and plan out the time that way. You have a scoring rubric. I don't know exactly how strictly that will be followed, but if there's something in the scoring rubric that says it has 5 points devoted to it, make sure you address it. If you don't address it, probably you might not get those points. In addition to my work, I've also been involved with Startup Week in Pensacola, several of those. And one of the things that has happened consistently is that different teams will get up there to do their presentations, and they haven't timed out their presentations. And so if the presentation has a strict 4-minute cap, and the engineers take 4 minutes to describe their portion, and then the business plan folks get up there and they're just totally out of time, that's it. So the rules are stated ahead of time, the scoring rubric is there ahead of time, follow it, and be prepared for it. So talking about camera, the good news is that everyone who has a smartphone has a very good camera. Even a years-old phone has a camera that's better than you could spend thousands and thousands of dollars on 15 years ago. So phone cameras are great, they're going to be perfect for whatever you need. Use the rear side, not the front side, because the selfie cameras are usually much cheaper and not as good quality. This should be, everyone knows this, right? Don't do vertical video. Turn it sideways. If you're going to be doing anything that's going to be in a presentation that's not like this, make sure you've turned the camera. Try not to go handheld if you can help it. I know that not everyone has a tripod, but anything you can do just to set up the camera, put it on a bookshelf, stack of books, anything. Just make sure that you are not trying to go handheld. It's not a Born Identity type film. Depth of field. Depth of field is the idea of the thing in your focus point being sharper than the things in the background or the foreground. It's that difference in space. And what that means is, practically, don't put your subject against the wall. We're not shooting mugshots. The more space you can put between your subject and the background, the blurrier the background will be. This is more pronounced on SLR cameras, things that have a very large film space where the lens is projecting. but camera phones will still have a decent depth of field, but just remember to put as much space between your subject and the background as possible. It makes for a more pleasant, graceful fall off to that blurriness in the background called bokeh. Lighting. So lighting, there's a lot of things to keep in mind and to watch out for. Dynamic range refers to the ability of the sensor to bright spot and a dark spot and to process everything in between. And so, short answer for anyone doing filming is on a digital sensor, your dynamic range is not going to be as good as with film or as a human eye. So don't put your subject in front of a window because the window is going to be totally blown out, and or the person in the front of the window will be totally, in shadows. And so try to keep in mind whatever your brightest point is, whatever your darkest point, the more that you can get those close together, the more tones will be represented in your image. Lighting, the main thing I would say about lighting is don't mix your color temperatures. And what that means is that all the light bulbs that are around have a different color temperature. Fluorescent bulbs tend to have one color temperature. Incandescent bulbs, like you might have in your home, have another color temperature. Daylight has another color temperature. And if you try to have all of those in one shot, if you don't take steps to avoid having all of those in one shot, the sensor of your camera will be thrown off. Everybody remember the dress? How you couldn't tell what colors was black and gold or blue and white or whatever it was. That was because it was the camera sensor that took the image could not find a white balance point. And so the image was just all over the place. So what I would recommend is, because most digital sensors are optimized for daylight, if you can stand your subject near a window, not where the window's behind them, but where the light from the window is illuminating them, that's going to be your best bet for a very simple no light setup. Ideally, in professional shooting environments, you'll have what's called a 3-point lighting setup. You have a key light, which is the strongest light. You have a fill light, which is a little bit less intense, and you have what's sometimes called a hair light or a rim light, which just kind of gives a little bit of a highlight along the back of the head to differentiate it from the background. I'm not thinking that most people will just have a 3-point lighting system in their house. So try to just keep in mind the idea of balancing light and shadow. Fancy word for it, chiaroscuro. But the idea is just that you don't want all of your lighting to be uniform. You don't want bright lights covering everything. You don't want things to be in total shadow. If you can have one main light source and then have a little bit of shadow on the other side, that helps to kind of define your subject. So that's for your talking head interviews. I understand that you're going to be doing a mix of talking heads, B-roll, voiceover, graphics, all those different elements. One of the things that you have to make a choice about when you do your talking heads is, where's the person looking? Most common is to have kind of an unseen interviewer. So if the camera is here, you're not looking right at the camera, you're kind of looking right off to the side of it. And that generally helps people because it's a little bit more flattering to view people at a slight angle than to be head on. Like, I can't imagine what I look like right now. But to be slightly at an angle is generally more flattering. There are, Philip Morris, I think, does a lot of documentaries where people are looking right into the camera. So there is a place for it, but generally speaking, it's going to be easier, more flattering, and also if you have someone the person can talk to, it will make your subjects more vibrant. They're actually talking to a person, not talking to a camera, which can feel uncomfortable. Composition, I talked about vertical video, but also just think about the composition. This is one of the things where a lot of people make an easy mistake. They'll look at the image on their camera and they'll think, well, I got everything I need in there, it's great, but the person will be in the corner, or there might be a bunch of unnecessary stuff crowding the frame. Think about what you need to have in the frame and then follow it. There's a rule of thirds, where if you imagine space divided into thirds, it's usually good to have things on your 1/3 lines. So keep that in mind when you're composing your shot. It just makes a big difference. Don't try to get everything into the shot. B-roll. B-roll, if you're shooting your subject, or if you have other things you need to shoot, just get a few shots of someone walking down hallways. If you have a clip of somebody talking and you need the beginning and the end of it, but then you find out when you're editing that the middle part, maybe just a few seconds doesn't fit, you can cut that out, but it helps to have a little bit of footage to overlay to hide that cut. Next, audio. So when you're doing your interview, I imagine most people won't have access to a microphone. If you do have a little lavalier mic, that's great, but probably not. So what I would recommend is when you're recording your talking heads, just find a space that's not very echoey. Find a space with a lot of ambient noise, if possible. And then when you record at the beginning or at the end of your filming, take about 5 to 10 seconds and just record empty ambient noise. And then in most audio programs, like there's a free program called Audacity, I believe, that does this. I use Adobe Audition. You can capture that empty space as a noise print and then use that to reduce the noise in the rest of your footage. For your non-talking head segments where you have voiceover, your camera app that records audio will be just fine, so that's great. Again, these are things that are all built into the phones now that didn't used to have, dedicated recorders that everyone needed. Editing, like I said, I use the Adobe Suite, Premiere, After Effects. I understand that if you don't have those on your own computers, you can go to the Skylab and they have those installed, so that's great. But there's also a lot of mobile apps that you can use of varying price points. A few ones that I understand that are free are Adobe Premiere Rush, iMovie, and Filmora Go. I've never used those, but I understand that they are very well respected as free apps on your mobile phone. Animated titles and transitions, this is a great way to add some production value, is to have, think about like social media videos that you see now this or whatever. When those titles come on the screen, this is a great way to add some motion to your presentation, not just physical motion of you standing, but motion in your video. So there's some apps that you can get. Animoto, you can get a free trial for Animoto, which a lot of companies use to make their social media videos more vibrant. Gravy, Gravie, Vont, V-O-N-T, and Overvideo, just a few suggestions. For things where you have a still image, consider using the Ken Burns effect, also called just a pan and zoom, where you pick a point on your photo and just slowly zoom in and slowly zoom out on that. Again, it's just a real easy way to add a little bit of production value to whatever it is you're using. Music, it's always good to have music in the background. It really changes the overall feel of the video. As far as finding something for free, what I use is just free-stock-music.com. Most of the tracks there use what's called a Creative Commons by SA attribution to share alike, which means all you have to do is put a credit in it somewhere in your video, at the end, at the beginning, or whatever, saying this is the name of the track, I got it from here, it's by this person. And that's a pretty reasonable way of using music for free. If you have a little bit of a budget and don't mind dropping $20 or something, Envato Elements or Audio Jungle from Envato is a pretty good place to find cheap, but again, not free stock music. Other assets, again, for your video, you may not be able to shoot everything on your own. It may help to get some stock photos, to get some stock video. I use Pixabay if I need absolutely free, no attribution photos. The selection is not great, but you can't argue with the price or the terms. Wikimedia Commons, archive.org, these are places where you can get photos and videos and sometimes audio that again usually has an attribution license where you just need to say where you got it from. And archive.org especially, it doesn't have the best search tools, but if you don't mind a little time digging, there's some really cool stuff there that can add some neat production value to your video. And again, Envato, if you don't mind spending a few dollars. I believe there's a student discount for Envato Elements, which is like a subscription service. But those are just some ideas to spice up your video. Again, the main thing is the content. The structure, whatever it is that you need to say, make sure that you have stated it clearly. Be prepared to defend it in person. But that's it.